Hi there, my name is Tyler Maloney. You might have seen me in a couple of feature matches here on YouTube. I'm here with the man who's usually in the hot seat, Eric Saffros Miller. Searfoss. I can't say it right.
You have said it wrong in like 15 different ways today. It's fine.
It's all good. Anyway, we are sitting here talking about quite possibly the spiciest deck we have ever had on this YouTube channel, Rakdos Eldrazi.
Dude, I don't know, man. I have seen some crazy stuff on this pile, but it's pretty good.
I don't know. We're talking about some spice today. Anyway, tell me, why should people play this deck before we get into it?
So, Rakdos Eldrazi, basically, if you ever played Jund, and you look at Jund and you're like, man, Tarmogoyf is pretty cool, but it's asymmetrical on the wrong side. Well, I have good news for you. You can just cast a Reality Smasher instead. You know, like you ever play a the Scavenging Ooze and realize that you've cast a Grizzly Bear in a competitive Modern tournament?
Yes, I have done
Well,
that.
I've never wanted to do that again. So instead, I'm playing Matter Shapers, Thought-Knot Seers, and Reality Smashers. I looked at all the green cards, and I just realized that there were just better things to be doing. So I looked at what makes a mid-range deck mid-rangey, and it's removal and big, stupid, idiot creatures. So, and eventually, I've been tuning this list for a couple years, and this is where we're sitting.
All right. Well, let's get to those big, stupid, idiot creatures. Let's go to the deck. All right, so starting off very basically, it's called Rakdos Eldrazi for a reason. We have the Eldrazi package. 4 Reshapers, 4 Thought-Knots, 4 Reality Smashers, and 2 Endbringers. Tell me about the Eldrazi package. What makes it so powerful?
So these are kind of your boilerplate Eldrazi right here. Reshaper, Thought-Knot, and Reality Smasher are basically the core of most Eldrazi decks. So I wanted all of these to be 4-ofs. You'll notice that most things in the deck are 4-ofs or 2-ofs, or except for like the random 1-of packages. But we'll get to that in a minute. Reshaper, absolutely phenomenal card. Whenever it dies, it replaces itself. Even with Path to Exile, it will still replace itself with a basic land out of your deck. We only run 4 basics, so that's kind of rough, but Matter Reshaper is almost always a 2-for-1 every time I cast it, which is always wonderful. Or sometimes it just gets in for 3. Thought-Knot Seer is my version of Thoughtseize. My Thoughtseize is just a 4-mana 4/4. I thought it was a good idea.
Perfectly reasonable.
Reality Smasher is probably one of the best attackers I've ever cast. I play, if you've seen the Goblins deck tech, you see that I like turning dudes sideways. Reality Smasher is a dude that turns sideways efficiently. It also has the very rarely read triggered ability. Whenever it's targeted by a spell, they have to discard or that a spell is countered, which is really fascinating because Is it Phoenix is the deck right now, and they are running lava or lightning axes.
Yeah, lightning axes.
Which now they have to discard 2 cards to their lightning axe.
Which, unless they're pitching 2 Phoenixes, just feels absolutely awful.
Yeah. It's been a little unexpected upside because I haven't really gotten to test this deck against that matchup a lot.
Right.
After that, we have the Endbringers. Something else you'll notice is I love me some modal spells, and Endbringer is a modal creature. He has 3 separate abilities. He untaps every turn. It is one of the best creatures I've ever cast, and I love him to death.
Right. The most powerful thing about the Eldrazi package for me is like you're playing a mid-range deck and you look at like the Jund and the green-black rock decks, and usually like they're like 1-for-1 removal, like Thoughtseize. Thoughtseize is a 1-for-1. All of these cards can be 2-for-1s. This can draw you a card and eat a removal spell. That's a 2-for-1. This makes you discard a card. That's a 2-for-1. This can flip into 2-for-1s. I've even had earlier where I flipped a Reshaper from a Reshaper.
Yeah.
And it's
and you'll see that's another theme of the deck. Mid-range is all about generating value, and I wanted to generate as much value as possible, as efficiently as possible. Moving forward, we have the Wormcoil engine, and that card is insane.
Wormcoil is a very, very unfair Magic card.
Oh, it's exceedingly fair. It's a 6-mana 6/6. It turns into 2 3/3s, but it's still a 6-mana 6/6.
Right.
And go ahead.
And then we have the Lord of Luxury himself, the absolute spice lord Gonti. Tell me, why is Gonti in this deck?
Gonti is one of those cards that I've literally had opponents scoop after I've cast him because there's just nothing you can do. In the mid-range mirror, so against like green black the rock against Jund, this guy grabs into your opponent's deck, grabs one of their good cards, and then plays it against them. Against control, it gives me a counter spell. You ever cast a counter spell with a red-black deck?
I've not, but that sounds
It's really
fun.
good. Gonti is also Death Touch, which is a very overlooked line of text on the card. He's a 2/3, so for 4 mana, he's not the best body. He eats every removal spell in the format, but I love casting him because he again, he's a 2-for-1. He's 2 things.
Generates so much value, especially against like these Phoenix decks. If you play a Gonti after Thing in the Ice flips, they can't attack you unless it eats a removal spell, and that's another 2-for-1.
Also, you can permanently exile one of their Phoenixes.
That is a
Just
good
grab
point.
a Phoenix and never cast it.
I did not even think about that. That is insane. So the creature lineup is pretty well established and good. I want to talk about this Arguel's Bloodfast.
I love Argo's Bloodfast. So you ever cast Greed in Commander? It's like a pretty standard, black enchantment. Well, it turns out it's really good in Modern. Again, you're playing these grindier matchups. You're playing against Control. You're playing against a Jund deck, and you want to be able to draw more cards. This is a very efficient way of drawing more cards. You're paying 2 life. You're paying 2 mana. But that gets it closer to its flip condition. The other side of the card, you can tap it and sacrifice a creature to gain life equal to that creature's toughness.
I believe that's a land. I believe it's called
Diamond Valley.
Yeah, Diamond
Yep.
Valley, which is a very powerful magic.
Which has saved my bacon against burn more times than I care to admit. Like, it's not a good plan. If that's your plan to not die against burn, you're gonna die.
Right.
You have died, but if you happen to stall them out for a minute and you dip under that 5 life, you can probably pull it out. It saved my bacon more than once, but you cannot rely on it.
Actually, an interesting interaction with the flip side is that you cast Thought-Knot Seer, and with the trigger on the stack, sack it to Diamond Valley.
Yeah, then they draw, and then you use that.
you take.
It's similar to the Path to Exile
Right.
interaction.
So moving down here to the removal suite, we have 2 Collective Brutalities, which is pretty standard. The card's very strong, as we've seen in the format.
It's a premier mid-range spell.
Yeah.
Again, I love me some modal spells, so it's right there.
We have the One of Dreadboard. This card, it seems like a bit of a flex slot, but it seems very powerful right now, especially with Esper playing like 6 Planeswalkers in its main deck.
Yeah, so you'll notice I'm running 4 Terminates and a Dreadbore. So I really want the Dreadbore because this deck's primary problem is Planeswalkers.
Yeah.
I have very few ways of interacting with them outside of just hitting it with a Reality Smasher, hitting it with, but like Dreadbore, Lightning, Lightning Bolt, K-Command.
And then taking it with Thought-Knot.
Yeah, but like, there's not a lot of ways of dealing with walkers once they've hit the battlefield in this deck. And so 1 Dreadbore isn't a lot, but it's more than I had.
Right.
I'd probably go up a Dreadbore and maybe axe a Terminate at some point.
Yeah, that seems perfectly reasonable. Now let's get on to the cards everybody wants to talk about. Take me through these gold-bordered promo Blightnings and Bituminous Blasts. First, what do these cards do since you do have the full art? No text?
Blightning is a 3-mana sorcery. It deals 3 damage to target opponent or planeswalker, and then that opponent or planeswalker's controller discards 2 cards. So it is basically a lava spike duct taped to a mind drop.
Yeah.
And this card is just overperformed in every single matchup I've played it in. If you're on the play, let's say, and your opponent mulls once. So if you're ever mulliganing against a Jund deck, you're like, oh no, they're going to pick my hand apart. I don't care about your early plays because I'm not really doing a lot. This deck does not have a lot of things to do in the early game. But you get to that turn 2, turn 3, turn 4, you're looking at only a couple cards in hand now. I'm getting rid of both of them because they're both probably going to try to win you the game.
Right.
Blightning is just one of those cards that just comes out of nowhere. No one plays around it. No one has to play around it, and it is just overperformed every single time.
It's also like you said,
it's really bad in the aggro matchup,
right?
But it's also phenomenal against burn because it basically gains you 6 life.
Right. And also, you were taking earlier, one of the main weaknesses of this deck is Planeswalkers. It's another piece of interaction that you do have. Like if a Jace brainstorms, you just go, okay, Lightning.
Yeah. Which is nice. Bituminous Blast is an instant. It deals 4 damage to a creature, and then it cascades. Cascade is an ability that whenever you cast a spell with Cascade, you can grab any spell with CMC less than this. You exile off the top of your deck until you hit it, and then you cast that spell for free without paying its mana cost. Let's look at all the cool things that you can cascade into right here. So, Blightnings, Terminates, Collective Brutality, Thought-Knot Seer. Oh, you can escalate these brutalities too.
Yeah, off of Cascade, which is insane.
Thought-Knot Seer, Reshaper, Lord of Luxury, Argol's Bloodfest, Kolagon's Command, which we'll get to in a second.
And this is all at instant speed. Have you ever casted instant speed Thought-Knots here?
Yeah. So some of the most ridiculous things that this card does is like they attack and declare blockers. You go Bit Blast one of your dudes, Cascade, get a Gonti, rip a card out of your deck, block your other thing with a Death Toucher.
Like we talked about earlier, more of that
like
generating immense value.
Bituminous Blast is one of those cards that I sideboarded out a lot because it's not really good. But game 1, or even if they are on like kind of a more mid-rangey plan, game 2, this card overperforms all the time.
Right.
After that, we have Lightning Bolt. I don't feel like I have to explain Lightning Bolt. And Kolagon's Command. So Kolagon's Command is that card that I kind of wanted. K-Command and Blightning are the 2 cards I wanted to build this deck around.
Right.
That's why I'm running 4, where most time you'll see Jund, they'll play like 2.
Yeah.
This card does everything. It's got a Shatter, it does a Shock, it's got a discard, it returns a creature to my hand. It does a lot. I love it. I got nothing else to say about it.
Right. I'm just imagining like having your Worm Coil die, getting 2 3/3s, and then bringing it back and playing it again. So moving on to the lands, I have to say this land base is very interesting to say the least. So,
it's awful.
Oh, it's bad. I didn't want to be the one to say it.
I will say it. This is the biggest problem with this deck is the mana base. We have extraordinarily greedy mana requirements all over the place. And if they cast a Blood Moon, there's not a lot I can do about it.
Right, you're kind of dead.
So like obviously, very boilerplate. We have the Eldrazi Temples, Sulphurous Springs, Blood Crypts, Bloodstained Mires. The Urborg makes it a little bit easier for me to cast these extra black mana requirements when I'm sitting on like weird these lands. The basics, I have 2 swamps to help me if I'm under a Blood Moon. They're the only way to cast any of my black spells. The mountain is there as kind of a concession to Ghost Quarter and Field of Ruin, because of a lot of times people will try to get me off of red because they'll assume that there's no mountain in the deck.
Right.
Because they'll see like a Blood Crypt and a swamp, and they're like, oh, I'll just Field of Ruin your Blood Crypt, and now you have no red mana. I'm like, oh, haha. And then there's a one of wastes. I probably should add another wastes to the deck.
Right.
But that's another thing entirely.
Also, Sulphur Springs tapping for colorless, since you do have the colors mana requirement, is very important.
All of this, it's a rough mana base, but like I've done the best I can with it.
Right.
It's probably not optimal, but it's not bad.
Yeah, it's definitely serviceable. You're getting to play games of Magic. So moving on to this hilariously awesome sideboard, starting off with 2 Knights of Soulless Betrayal. How has that been treating you?
So, locally, very, very well. It's completely useless at like a competitive level event.
Right.
And honestly, they'll probably be Dreadboards if I ever take this. If you ever take this to like a classic or something, you want those to be Dreadboards or an open. But there's a lot of decks with the going wide little dude package.
Right.
And that's just what we got to do with it.
Speaking of playing against going wide, we have an All Is Dust and a Languish.
So Languish is really good against the like Spirits deck because they have the ability to make things indestructible. Also, Damnation's a $30 Magic card.
Right.
And that was the Damnation slot. Now it's Languish. I kind of like Languish more right now. I like getting around indestructibility, which is why All Is Dust is really good and Languish is really good. So I don't know. That's just my option.
Also, moving on to probably my favorite card in this entire deck. Tell me why we're playing a Boil.
So there's a lot of decks that are like Blue X or Blue XX that run a lot of islands, and it turns out they need those islands to operate.
Right.
So I want them to not have islands, so I blow them up.
That's perfectly reasonable. There's probably plenty of games where you've had a one-sided Armageddon because of Boil.
Most of the time, yeah.
Yeah.
If I'm bringing it in, like, and it's an instant, so I can do it in response to them doing things. So if they're tapping out to like counter something else, I just go Boil.
Right.
And then their lands are gone. It is not the most optimal for like solution to these problems, but it's a very good card. Anyway,
so Shatterstorm, obviously, Word Prison's been very on an uptick, so I'm assuming that's an out to that.
Yeah, I've not played against it personally, so I haven't brought it in, but Affinity was really popular when I last built this sideboard, so...
Yeah. 2 Alpine Moon, you obviously can't Blood Moon yourself.
If Blood Mooning myself would be really suboptimal.
Right. So Alpine Moon, probably just an out to Tron, I'm assuming.
Tron, Valakut, anything that's trying to do weird things with lands.
Amulet.
Yeah, it turns off their main utility lands that kill me.
2 Anger of the Gods, more like for these go wide strategies.
So the Angers and the Rakdos Charms are my Dredge solution.
Okay.
And my Phoenix solution. There's a lot of graveyard-based decks. And Anger does also deal with the go wide strategy, but Anger exiles, and that's a really important thing. So this is kind of my solution to how to deal with the graveyards-based decks.
And then the Warping Wheel, you tell me all that, you've told us several times, you love you some mode cards. Tell me what Warping Wheel is in your sideboard.
It counters a sorcery, it gives me a 1/1 that makes mana.
Right.
It what is the other mode? Oh, it exiles a creature power or toughness 1 or less. So there's a lot of times where people have like random combo pieces that are creatures, or they're like, I'm going to try to cast Escape Shift, and this is a card that solves that problem.
Right.
Again, Rakdos Charm is another like modal spell, and it's just so good. I've had games where I've cast all 3 modes of Rakdos Charm because they're really good.
Right.
And I love them. And that's one of the things about this sideboard is you notice there's not any silver bullets. I don't believe in silver bullet cards. I believe in adding percentages because this deck has no bad matchups. Everything this deck does is 50-50. And the sideboard exists to tip the scales in my favor because every card in this sideboard is good against multiple decks. There isn't a single card that I bring in only for one matchup.
Right.
And that's, I think, a really important thing, in my opinion.
So, and to wrap up, is there anything that you might want to change about this deck moving forward? I know War of the Spark's coming out soon. Is there any card that you've seen from that you might be excited to play with?
I unironically want to cast Bolus's Citadel in here. So Wormcoil Engine is kind of in a flex slot, so to speak. It is the 5 to 6 mana $20 card flex slot.
Right.
It's been a billion different things. It's been a Noxious Gearhulk. It's been I had an Angrath in there. I kind of want to put Angrath back in, honestly, because God, you ever cast an Angrath?
That card is hilariously fun to cast.
It's been a Malfagor once. That was so fun. But like, so if anything comes in, it'll probably be in the Wormcoil Engine slot. And like Bolus's Citadel seems super fun. I want to cast a Bituminous Blast on the top of my deck for 5 life.
Free Bituminous Blast. That sounds great. Well, hopefully when War of the Spark comes out, we get to see that. Thank you so much for talking with us, showing us this amazing pile of cards.
It's always awkward to be on this side of the table.
Yeah,
because,
I can imagine.
Yeah, but anyway.
Anyway, so live from Epic Loot in Centerville, I'm Tyler Maloney at Twitch Prime Subs on Twitter.
I'm Eric Sirifos Miller.
And this has been the Rakdos Eldrazi Deck Tech. Thank you for joining us today. Have a good night.
Goodbye, everyone.